Hi, my name's Noel, I'm a psychotherapist. Welcome to this Facebook Live video. I'm the founder and director of my company, Noel McDermott Psychotherapy and Consultancy Limited. Bit of a mouthful that, just call me Noel. Before we start, can I just check that you can hear me? So if you just tap the screen, do a like. So that I know that the volume's okay on this live broadcast, which is going to be looking at over the next 30 to 40 minutes or so. Thanks very much. Got those likes coming in. Just let me know throughout. I'll ask you every now and then to just give me a like. I'm feeling a bit lonely, maybe I just need a few likes. There you go. But I'll just check that the volume's okay. So over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we're going to be looking at stress, what it is. Why we have it and what we can do about it, the sort of stress busting techniques. And hope you find it useful. It'd be really great as we're going along, if you think of some questions you want to answer, just sort of type them in and send them through to me. If I can answer them now, I will. If I can't answer them now, I'll get onto them later on. So sort of give me some contact details for you. Hey John, nice to see you. Actually, I haven't seen you in ages. How are you? Sorry, a mate of mine has just joined in, so there you go. Feeling less lonely now with friendly faces on. So let's just jump into this whole stress thing. Why are we doing it, first of all? We're doing it because this is Stress Awareness Month. So we thought it might be helpful to give you some handy tips. So let's first think about what stress is from a sort of clinical perspective, if you like. Hey, Saz is here as well. Welcome. Say hi, Saz. Saz is a great pal up in Scotland who does some great psychotherapy work, actually. You should check them out, online events. They're a great organisation. So what is stress? Let's have a look at what it is. First of all, stress is a hormonal, physiological reaction to difficult circumstances. Yeah, John, thanks. I will be at ICAD, so my company will be there. Jump along on 7th to 9th of May. Come along and sort of have a chat with us. Be great to see folks there. That's in London. Just Google ICAD London, you'll find out. Hey, Saz, nice to see you. What is stress? It's a physiological, hormonal sort of response to things in life that are very simply causing us to feel afraid. Now, stress is the combination of fear over a period of time, which has led to a breakdown of our capacity to manage that fear. It's begun to overwhelm us. So stress are these sort of hormonal responses to situations which they produce sort of typically hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol in us, which are fine every now and then when we have them. You know, if the saber-toothed tiger is about to eat you, they're quite useful things to have in your body because they'll give you extraordinary strength and perception and capacity to get out of danger. But if you have these things going on all the time, if you have these hormones in your body all the time, they actually become quite debilitating and can become quite difficult for you to manage, particularly things like cortisol. And I'll go into that a bit more later on in the live. But these hormones can produce very, very difficult physical symptoms and emotional symptoms if they're over a period of time. So typically, to know that you're stressed out, what sort of things might be going on. Hello, Scarlett. Thanks for joining us. Say hi. So the sort of things that might be going on when you're experiencing stress, and again, it's sort of fear over time, if you think about it. You're having too much fear for too long. The sort of things that you might notice is that particularly you might be feeling overwhelmed. That you are sort of getting out of bed, facing getting out of bed, or facing particular types of circumstances which you associate with difficult or frightening things. You might begin to avoid those things. So you want to stay in bed. You're feeling a bit low in mood. You're feeling worried all the time. You might have a racing mind. You might find that you're very tense all the time physically. Your muscles, you find it difficult to just relax and let go of the tension in your muscles, or you're fidgeting all the time, or quite the opposite actually. You might be sort of completely lethargic because you're overwhelmed and you find it difficult to motivate yourself to actually move. Your mood may be low. You may be having a sense of dread about things in general and things in particular, certain things that might be stressing you out. So essentially what I'm describing are things which are called depression and anxiety. So you'll prototypically, when you're having a stress response, have, hey Craig, thanks for joining us, you will have anxiety and depression symptoms. What I'll do when I post this video is I will put, hey Alexandra, nice to see you. I will post these symptoms for you, so you'll have a list of depression and anxiety symptoms. Other things that might happen is you may get into what we call self-defeating coping strategies around using alcohol in particular, or other forms of medication, to try and manage these difficult and uncomfortable feelings of anxiety and stress. And that will have its own problems, because alcohol and drugs, the use of alcohol and drugs in that way is definitely not recommended, and will bring its own problems, and actually won't help you manage the symptoms themselves. There are much more effective ways of managing symptoms, and may create their own types of problems, because chronic use or difficult use of alcohol, for example, can cause all sorts of problems that will exacerbate any stress that you're feeling rather than reduce them. Other things that you might do, you might find yourself becoming snappy and irritable and angry in very general with people, and things like you might be walking down the street and suddenly find yourself in a rage about nothing at all. So those types of symptoms that you might find yourself. Your relationships with other people obviously will become quite strained under those types of circumstances. So there's a range of things that you might experience, both physical, interpersonal and behavioural. You'll see things such as your sleep might be interrupted, the way you eat food might change suddenly. So all of these things are signs that there's a problem, that there's something going on. If you have this combination of symptoms for anything more than 2 weeks, you probably have a problem and need to sort of get help with it. But help is at hand. Stress is a sort of well-known thing, or anxiety, if you want to call it, extreme anxiety, is a well-known thing, and there's plenty of help for it. So don't sort of get into stressing yourself out about the fact that you might have stress. There's plenty of help for it. We did a poll on our hey Mark, welcome, haven't seen you in ages, how's the band going? We did a poll on our Facebook page about what is currently, over the last couple of days, what people find most stressful in life. There are 2 questions: your home life or your work life. And it was relatively balanced. I was quite surprised by that. It's relatively balanced. There was slightly more people said that it was sort of work life that was causing them stress. Here's what sort of research tells us are the areas in which people might find stress. It's an interesting list. Job pressure, or money and security issues about whether I've got enough money and can pay the bills. Quality of life, as in work-life balance. I don't have enough sort of quality time with myself or with the people that I care about, or my kids, etc. Health and habits, sort of social pressures to conform to sort of the body perfect, all that sort of stuff. Relationships, both personal and professional. What struck me about that list is that's everything. Pretty much. I'm trying to think what's missing from there in terms of life. So the point is this, that's not a facetious comment, it's quite a serious comment, that stress, or stressors as we call them, these types of things that exist, can happen throughout the whole of life and the whole experience of life. Stressors as such are not possible to avoid. So one of the main sort of dysfunctional or unhelpful strategies that people have around stress is avoidance. If you use that as a strategy to try and manage stressors or try and manage stress, you're effectively checking out of life. If you look at that list, you'll be avoiding everything by the end of that strategy or that choice. So I wouldn't suggest that as a sort of useful strategy, because you're not actually engaging with life. I think one of the tips that we need to look at in terms of stressors is it's not the stressors themselves necessarily, it's our reaction to those stressors that we need to be looking at. And the secret lies in the fact that inside of us is the response that we're looking at. It's our physiological, our hormonal response that has been activated. Thanks, Saz. Thanks for that feedback. given that it's something that's inside of us that has been activated, we're in a great position around that to actually be able to do something about it. Because if you try and manage the whole of life and manage out all the stressors, that's going to get very complicated very quickly, and you're going to get very overwhelmed very quickly. So really, the opposite of stress is what in psychotherapy or psychological terms we call resilience. So you're looking at building resilience within yourself and between yourself and other support mechanisms, so that you can then deal with the inevitable stressors that life throw at you in a way that isn't self-harming to yourself, isn't damaging to yourself, and isn't damaging to the relationships around you. And I want to come back to this point in terms of looking at the use of things like alcohol or drugs or etc., those types of responses to the trying to manage stress within oneself, because those types of behaviours and activities actually become really quite antisocial, and that's why they become the problem themselves. Because inevitably, if you're drinking too heavily or taking drugs a lot, that will lead to problems in the relationships with people around you, which will increase the isolation and stress that you have. So I'm going to go through a few sort of listed known methods of stress busting or stress management, if you like. And really it's about management of yourself and stepping into a much more sort of resilient sense of the relationships around you, a resilient sense of your own capacity to cope. And so that brings me to one of the things that is really important in terms of managing or setting up a system whereby you're managing stressors, life stressors, much more effectively. And that is to move out of the sense in which that it's out of your control. It's a reframing technique. If you know anything about cognitive behavioural therapy, they often will talk about this, about sort of reframing your mental experience of it, putting it into... one of the big problems about stress is the idea that we feel that we are a victim of it and there's not much that we can do about it. And one of the sort of top things that we can do about it is reframing that experience, so that we begin to understand that actually there's a lot I can do, because the stress is in me, it's not out there. Those are stressors, but it's my reaction to those things that is causing me the stress very often. Not always. I mean, there are situations in life that are genuinely very difficult, where you need to try and get out of that situation in life. But often, and this is another really important sort of point in stress management and reducing stress levels within yourself or stress responses within yourself, is acceptance of things that you actually can't do very much about. It's a very, very self-defeating strategy. It's understandable, but what we tend to do with those big problems, such as the amount of money that's coming in every week and the worry about that, is to focus on that thing. There's probably not a lot you can do in the very short term, for example, about the amount of money that you've got coming in each week or each month. If you spend all of your time just focusing on that, you will get into a very disempowered situation and very, very quickly be sort of making yourself feel very, very frightened indeed. It's not going to be helpful. So if you can learn acceptance around certain types of things that you have no power to control, certainly in the short term, there are things you can do about improving your economic circumstances, but they tend to be medium and long-term sort of goals and plans, which then comes to another sense in which I want to talk about things that is empowering and also helps reduce the stress responses within yourself, which is to start planning things. Some of these big life stressors need an action plan around them that with a realistic sort of timescale to them. The other thing that does is when you start to action plan some of the bigger stressors that are maybe sort of slightly more fixed in your life, such as maybe it's your career issues, maybe it's financial issues, maybe it's other types of issues that are not going to go away very quickly, but can change with some time. If you can begin to break those larger life tasks down into smaller life tasks, into smaller goals and stages with realistic timescales, you're actually giving yourself a fighting chance at reducing very significantly the amount of stress that you feel within yourself about these events. You begin to see, if you like, there's light at the end of that particular tunnel. Coming and thinking about work as a stressor is we can tend to, because of the stress or fear response, we can tend to throw ourselves at something when in fact, and particularly around work, we can tend to think that if the stressor is work, you can tend to think if I work more and more and more, that will solve the problem. Actually, the opposite is true. If you do that, you're getting more and more out of balance. So the main stressor in your life is around sort of work issues. You want to be thinking about how you work smarter rather than working more. So you actually reduce the sort of amount of effort and time that you put into work, but you think about it in terms of prioritising it, which leads to another stress-busting technique, bringing in that work-life balance, or thinking about things like how you have some more me time. Having me time, time in your life, time in your day, when you can focus on yourself and your own personal needs, and also in terms of your fun activities, the things that bring joy into your life, is incredibly important. And setting out time each day, each week, each month in which you're going to be doing the sorts of things that give you pleasure, whatever that pleasure might be, going to the cinema, hanging out with your pals, is incredibly important. Now, the reason why that works is coming back to an earlier point I said about resilience. A simple definition of resilience from a sort of psychological perspective is the number and the range of supportive emotional relationships that you have in your life. It's very simple. The reason for this is that we're social animals. We are designed to be in groups. One of the things about a stress response or feeling stress is that we want to isolate, we want to avoid, and also we engage in antisocial activities. Those things in themselves will produce stress in a human. If you think about this, for example, one of the punishments that you can be given if you're in prison, for example, is solitary confinement. Effectively, we do that to ourselves when we are experiencing stress. We will give ourselves a sort of emotional and relational solitary confinement. We will avoid people, places and things. We'll engage in antisocial activities like getting drunk all the time, etc., and cut ourselves off from people. Avoid picking up the phone because it's just too much. Avoid looking at the emails because they produce this sort of anxious reaction in us. So we go into a sort of solitary confinement. So one of the best stress busters is to challenge that and to start to reach out and begin to re-engage with a social network. I mean, if you find that you are... Hi, Lucy, welcome. If you find that, you are quite isolated anyway, or sort of lonely in general, there are lots of support groups out there that you can link into that will help you begin that process of sort of re-engaging socially in life. Hello, Car, welcome. If you're sort of unsure about how to engage in any of these things, please do send me a message. I can give you a list of support groups and sort of options to think about if that you're finding yourself quite isolated. So working smarter, being around people, dropping unhealthy habits, having me time, connecting with other people, all these are really, really important things. Other things that you might want to bring into your stress reduction, stress management plan is thinking about being active. And by that I mean that you sort of getting physical exercise into your life. So coming back to the hormones and what they do to us. So these stress hormones that we have, adrenaline and cortisol, are designed for very specific things. It's the activation of our threat mechanism. So what's happening inside our brains, a particular bit of the brain called the amygdala, is hello Marco, welcome. Are you in London now? Be good to see you soon. What's happening is that our brain is perceiving that there's a threat to our lives. And it's producing hormones that will give us the capacity to save our life if that is the case, if there's a sort of predator after us. And those hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, what they do specifically is they raise the heartbeat, for example. They give us explosive energy in our muscles, etc. And they will help us do one of two of three sort of survival reactions, which are fight, flight, freeze are the survival reactions, and they give us the power to do fight or flight because of this sort of explosive energy that they give us. The sort of raised heartbeat oxygenates the blood, etc. And so we using fight or flight and thinking that that's what the body wants to do, and that's what's happening, that's what these hormones gives us an understanding of a really, really important stress busting technique, fight or flight. So if you think that these hormones are designed to allow you to run away incredibly fast and get to safety, or to attack the predator and kill them, then you can think about, well, okay, what could I actually do that mimics that will sort of allow me to burn off these hormones and fool my brain into thinking I've actually done that? Well, most people have a gym or they have a park, etc., etc. So one of the things I always suggest to people that I'm working with is get active in that way, but very specifically look at high intensity activity. So high intensity training, for example, is a fantastic way of dealing with some of the build-up of these stress hormones in your body. And high intense training is very it's a gym term, a personal training term, and it means that you will do 30 seconds of incredibly high energy sort of running or punching or boxing or something like that, or weightlifting, whatever it is, and then you'll stop for 40 seconds. And these high intense bursts are mimic these fight, flight, freeze things that we do, or the fight, flight bit of it, are incredibly positive. Another thing I suggest to people, and I think it's a fantastic thing to get involved in terms of long-term stress management, is get involved in things like kickboxing or box fit. They are in fact exactly what your body wants to be doing. So get down to your local gym, get involved in some kickboxing, and you will find that will be really, really helpful. And if you're in a highly stress-inducing environment at work or something like that, you may be in the type of job where there's lots of demands for you, so you can't do much about it. Maybe you actually enjoy the job and you want to keep it. Introducing something like kickboxing into your lifestyle will be incredibly helpful for you. So I suggest you go and do it. Which maybe is the opposite of what you thought I might say. Maybe you thought I was going to say just relax a lot. But I want to come to that because actually bringing in things like relaxation into your routine is very important as well. Because remember I talked about the sort of physical stress that you might feel in your musculature. There's one way of dealing with that is to get into this sort of really active physical exercise, kickboxing, HIIT, etc. Another way of dealing with that is getting yourself a relaxation app, or getting on YouTube and getting into some of those videos that exist on YouTube for free, and then using those to train your body into the physical feeling of relaxation. I've used them myself. And there's a great one. Andrew Johnson is a great one in the App Store. Go and check him out. I've got an app called Relax, and I used it for 6 weeks. And I can literally say in my head now, relax, and my muscles want to do it. So learning that physical sensation of relaxation is great because it begins to send signals to that bit of your brain that thinks you're going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger that actually, nope, it's fine. There is no saber-toothed tiger in the room. The saber-toothed tiger has left the room. So learning how to communicate with that bit of your brain in the way that it understands, which is physical biofeedback, we call it. So have I gone through all my 10 lists? I made a list because this is potentially a stressful sort of experience for me. So I gave myself a little cheat. Here's a little trick for you. Challenge yourself. Aha! there is always one thing that I forget. And now here, because I've got my list, I can tell you, challenge yourself. Long-term stress sort of management or resilience forming activity. So think of stress reduction activities as falling into two main groups. One is sort of immediately dealing with the physiological symptoms, so a bit of exercise, relaxation. I'm going to teach you some mindfulness before we finish. Doing those types of things are immediately relieving. But then there's long-term things which are about increasing your resilience in life. So improving your social network, doing things that are fun, bringing that back into your life so that you are happier in general. Use of positive psychology, try and focus on positive things. These are long-term strategies, as is this one, which is challenge yourself, which in simple layperson's terms means get and learn stuff, learn new stuff, go on courses, educate yourself, pick up an instrument, learn how to play a new instrument, learn a new activity. You know that horse riding you've always wanted to do, get on and do it, learn how to do it. You've always wanted to learn how to climb a mountain, go and do it. These sort of challenges in life are well known to increase our resilience over time, particularly in our brain, which loves learning. One thing about stress is that we begin to shut down on learning and shut down on thinking about the long term. We're getting to sort of immediate, I'm going to die stuff. You get into this sort of long-term thinking and learning and goals and activities, and you really, really do take yourself out of that mindset of that, I'm going to be killed immediately, which is essentially what these stress hormones are doing. I'm going to leave you fairly soon with these, so I think it's sort of a roundup. But if I'm thinking of one thing, I want to do mindfulness. I'm going to teach you that before we go. There is one other thing, though, that I think is probably right near the top of the sort of gold of sort of stress reduction long term, and it seems to have a sort of an immediate hit as well as a long-term hit, and that is go out and help other people less fortunate than yourselves. It's extraordinary the impact of helping others has on everything. It's one of those what we call a global. It has a global impact. It impacts on your sort of self-worth, self-esteem. It increases your social connectedness, so it reduces your sense of isolation. It puts things into perspective, so you begin to see that maybe your life isn't as bad as you thought, so you move out of the victim. So you can see it's actually covering a huge number of things. It also gives you a really good sort of dose of reward chemicals. So the neurochemicals in your brain that give you happy thoughts. So it's dealing with the depressive symptoms and the down symptoms. It also challenges the isolation, because often, even when we feel really awful about ourselves or our circumstances, our sense of commitment to helping somebody who's less fortunate than ourselves will drag us out and require us to go and sort of help them out. It's one of those amazing things, and not only is it helping you, but it's actually helping somebody who's less fortunate than you. So it's making the world a better place. It's a total win-win situation. Before we go and before I round up, I'm going to have a little bit of quiet, stress-free time with you, and I'm going to teach you another technique. Very, very quickly, I'm going to teach you a technique which I think is extraordinarily powerful and extraordinarily simple. For those that know it, you just jump in and meditate with me. For those that don't know, I'm going to teach you how to do mindful meditation. It is the simplest thing in the world, and there is a mountain the size of Everest to tell us how positive and useful this technique is for us. If you haven't done it before, you're going to be thinking, what is this guy going on? That can't be that simple. Something that simple can't possibly do all sorts of things that it's claimed it can do, but it does. Mindfulness helps us with mood disorders. Mindfulness helps reduce the risk of all sorts of horrible illnesses such as cancer, etc. Mindfulness improves our performance at work because it improves our capacity to make decisions in a thoughtful manner. It improves our relationships with other people because we get into what's called the observer position. So we can look at our own reactions and other people's reactions without overreacting, etc., etc. I mean, the list of things that mindfulness is helpful with, it grows, actually. It doesn't seem to stop. And it is this simple. I'm going to teach you. Mindfulness is a simple breathing technique. If you're sitting in a chair like this, that's great. Relax your shoulders. You want to sort of not be slouching too much, as I was, and sort of resting your head on top of, a relatively upright spine, but not straight. Relaxing your shoulders. And mindfulness is this. I'm going to take my glasses off. Now, what I'm doing, for those who are uninitiated, is I'm breathing in and out through my nose. And I'm focusing my thoughts on where I can feel the breath coming in and out through my nose the most. I'm going to do it again, just have a watch and listen. Okay, so I can feel the breath coming in and out through my nose there the most, and I'm just bringing my attention to that place. Now, what happens when you're doing this exercise is you'll find that your mind will wander. That's all right, it does. But try and notice it's wandered off, be interested, and try and bring it gently, easily back to that point that you have chosen where you can feel the breath coming in and out your nose the most. That is mindfulness. Now, let me just do it as I'm sitting in the chair in a very much more naturalistic way. Now, I've just done mindfulness right there. You can imagine if you're at work or if you're driving in the car or even you're walking down the street, you can be doing that breathing exercise and nobody's going to notice. It's not obtrusive, it's not odd. Nobody's going to point a finger at you or anything like that. And you can be doing this type of breathing exercise anywhere. And then you get that long list of things that I described as a benefit just simply for doing that, just simply for breathing in and out through your nose and focusing your mind on that point on your nose that you can feel the most. How bizarre is that? And it's the truth. It will reduce stress enormously. It will reduce anxiety and depression. It will improve your physical functioning, improve your functioning at work, it'll improve your relationships with yourself, it'll improve your relationships with other people around you. And all you have to do is breathe for a couple of minutes each day. Literally 5 minutes of that breathing per day will begin over time to produce all these benefits for you. And here's the killer. You don't even have to do the whole 5 minutes in one go. You can do 1 minute 5 times throughout the day. Surely you can find 5 minutes. I think anybody can find 5 minutes. Or maybe you can just find 1 minute and that'll do. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with that and just a recap on what we've gone through in this live broadcast today. So stress is a hormonal reaction, it's a physiological reaction to a perception of extreme danger. And stress is this perception of danger in the mind, perception of something that is a threat, that has produced these fear hormones in the body. And stress is that having happened over a long period of time, more than 2 weeks, usually for sort of 3, 4, 5 weeks. And you begin to notice symptoms of stress, such as anxiety and depression, issues around sleeping. You might find yourself trying to self-medicate on alcohol or drugs. You'll find that you're losing your temper more often with people. Relationships are beginning to break down at home or at work. You'll find your libido will go out the window. You get angry a lot very easily. That you're avoidant. That you catastrophize. That you feel overwhelmed, etc. Those are the sort of typical symptoms. If you're noticing these symptoms, or if you notice them in somebody else, begin to get a plan together for sort of managing stress. And remember, managing stress is managing one's own reaction to stressors. Don't get sucked into thinking that I've got to sort out the world and then I'll feel better. You can feel better in yourself, and then once you feel better in yourself, your ability to manage all that other stuff improves anyway. So focus on yourself first. Look at getting active, look at connecting with people, look at having me time, look at getting yourself into educational courses and challenging yourself. Reduce the unhealthy habits such as trying to medicate through drink and drugs. Get out and do voluntary work, start helping other people, work smarter, not harder. Have positive psychology, so focus on the positive things. Accept what you can't change. Learn acceptance. Step out of being a victim. Get an action plan. Talk to people. Take control of this situation. So that's it. I hope that was useful. Please do get in touch if you're struggling with any of these things and you feel that you need some extra help, and I can point you in the right direction. Happy to sort of have a chat with people on the phone. 07506 319 745. Point you in the direction of loads of help. There's masses of help out there for this, because stress is so all pervasive, and actually it is very, as I can see, it is quite straightforward in terms of avoiding it. Maybe not completely, but avoiding the more debilitating effects of it. Thanks for joining me. Hope that was useful. The video will get processed somehow magically by Facebook, and then it'll be out on the page, and you can sort of check out some of the tips. Okay, thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.